The three small boats drifted effortlessly upon the gentle current, carrying the group into the embrace of the forest of La Flora. In the first boat, Void sat steadily at the helm, his hands resting lightly on the wooden edges as he guided the craft through the winding waters with a paddle. Beside him, Jida rested by Jay in his carriage. The infant cooed softly as she whispered tender, loving words to him. Toonie and Sky occupied the remaining space alongside them, their hands occasionally brushing as the boat rocked gently. The second boat carried Kor, who sat motionless yet vigilant as always. Sika rested close by, with her expression unusually relaxed as she leaned against the vessel's side. Joby bobbed her head from side to side, while Ellie kept a protective hand on Coco, who clutched Maple tightly against her chest. The little doe's muzzle was stained amber once more as she gulped down another bottle of syrup from Andy's bag. The final boat held the A&N crew, who occupied one end while Cogson sat cross-legged in the other. The forest stretched endlessly in all directions. The dominant hues were those of deep ocean blues and bright purples, intertwined with the warm embrace of pinks and oranges that seemed to emanate from flowers rising out of the snow. The trees, with their trunks massive and ancient, stood like warriors, their bark spiraling upwards in twisted patterns that defied any natural formation. More flowers sprouted from every branch. And then there were the firefly-like beings, creatures of pure light matter, their small bodies little balls of light, burning with bioluminescence that looked to paint the air itself. They drifted everywhere, between the boats, around the twisted trees, and across the snow-covered ground. Their soft glow illuminated their faces, turning the entire forest into what could best be described as a living, breathing lantern. "Oh, isn't it pretty, Jay?" Jida's voice sang out as she bounced the infant gently in the carriage. "We have a big forest just like this back at home. It'll be like your own personal playground." Jay's wide eyes absorbed the scene before him, his tiny hands reaching toward the floating lights that danced beyond the boat's edge. He gurgled in response, utterly captivated by the magical landscape. "Blue, isn't it just beautiful?" Jida turned her gaze upwards, allowing a bold firefly to land upon her hand as she reached for it. Its light pulsed gently against her skin. Void nodded softly, his face catching the ambient glow of the forest. "Sure is," he agreed quietly. La Flora was known as the Holy Bloom. It's only fitting this is her sector. Jida studied him for a moment, her expression growing more serious. "Have you thought about what you'll say when you meet them? The Sparkborns?" The question hung in the air between them. Void's gaze drifted outwards, past the boat and past the glowing trees, into some distance that existed only in his mind. "Honestly, Jida, I've kind of been thinking about other things," he admitted with a smile crossing his features. "Crazy, I know," he followed up. "What things?" Jida pressed gently, her head cocking to one side. Void turned back to face her, his eyes carrying that familiar softness Jida adored so much. "I've been thinking that once this is all said and done, I would hope to maybe just enjoy some normalcy for a bit," Void admitted with a small smile. "Normalcy?" Jida repeated, her brow furrowing slightly. Void nodded. "We've been fighting and defending for so long now," Void continued, his voice just barely above a whisper. "With Jay here, with my family, our family." He hesitated, choosing his next words with deliberate care. "I wouldn't mind maybe resting for a bit, being a father, a husband, just being Void Novawoods." The words struck Jida with unexpected force. She reached her hand out and cupped the side of his face, her thumb tracing the ridge of his lower horn. "Obviously, I'm not saying we should hang up the scarf and cloak," he said softly. "But maybe we could just be like a normal family for once? Jada finished, with a genuine laugh escaping her lips. Yeah, Void agreed. Although nothing is normal when it comes to us. He said with a sigh. Hey, Jada added. It'll be our normal. I mean, I gave birth to a hybrid alien demigod. Void chuckled, the sound carrying genuine warmth. He reached down, taking her hand in his, their fingers intertwining naturally. His gaze fell upon the ring that encircled her finger, the engagement ring he had placed there not too long ago now. Jada, I've been meaning to ask, he began. What kind of wedding would you like? Is there a tradition you've been thinking about, or... I don't know much about how you humans, do engagements, so you'll have to... Void began, before suddenly being cut off. I want to get married how Sparks got married, Blue. Jada interrupted, abruptly. Void looked up, his expression shifting from confusion to genuine surprise. What? He asked with wide eyes. You heard me, she repeated, her smile stretching from ear to pointy ear. I want to get married the same way your kind does. I've been wanting it that way since we fell in love. Jada admitted, pressing her fingers together and looking away with a bashful expression. Void's mind struggled to process her words. Jada, wouldn't you rather be married in a traditional sense? Spark weddings are very outdoorsy. We wear flower crowns and have huge feasts and... He stalled mid-sentence, interrupted by the sight of Jada's grinning face. Her expression was of pure joy and wanting. I didn't fall in love with a boring human, Void, she said. I fell in love with you. Ever since then, life has been the most exciting experience I could have ever imagined. You're everything to me, so I want to marry you in a special way. Your way. Void felt his face flush with color. Jada, Again, she teased gently. I gave birth to an alien. I'd say it's only fitting I have an alien wedding too. Void nodded slowly, his mind reeling, but his soul chamber entirely accepting. Okay. I'll ask Cora and the others to make arrangements. It won't be anything fancy, but I'll make sure it's the best it can be. He leaned forwards, pressing his forehead gently against hers. I love you, Jada whispered. And I love you too, Void replied. Their moment was broken by a small, garbled sound emanating from the carriage. Both turned simultaneously to find Jay gazing up at them, his tiny face scrunched in concentration.
I love you,
Jay said with effort. Jada practically screamed with joy, the sound echoing through the trees and startling several fireflies in the spiraling flight. She leaned over the carriage's edge, nuzzling her nose against Jay's forehead. Good job! Oh, we love you too! She exclaimed, tears of happiness forming in the corners of her eyes. Jay beamed up at her, clearly pleased with the reaction his words had produced.
I love you,
he repeated, with greater confidence. Void lifted his head, surveying the other boats with a satisfied smile. The atmosphere was infectious. Every face seemed illuminated with contentment. Toonie and Sky spoke in quiet tones, occasionally giggling at some private joke or story. Cord and Sika conversed happily, Sika's lips curved in what Void recognized as an actual smile. They looked like a couple rediscovering what had drawn them together in the first place. It warmed something deep within Void's chest to witness it after so many years. Ellie and Coco had given Maple to Joby, as she danced and did little tricks for her amusement. Void found himself impressed that Ellie had agreed to take in the Hoovlin. He wondered how she'd fare as an actual mother. The thought both terrified and fascinated him. Then again, Coco was there to help, which provided considerable reassurance. His gaze shifted to the final boat, where Coxon was holding conversation. The older Spark appeared to be fixing and adjusting the night helmet Winona took. He spoke on it, his voice carrying snippets of epic tales of ages long before they were even born. The ANN crew listened with attention. Andy among them looked more relaxed, nodding their head as Coxon spoke on. Then with a triumphant shout, Coxon slammed a hatch closed on the helmet and placed it on Winona's head. As it settled, its visor burned yellow, and like Void's, where a blue stripe went beneath his visor, a pink stripe went underneath Winona's, the helmet reacting and changing to match her armor. He couldn't hear what Winona was saying, but he could see the excitement in her eyes. She pointed at herself with unrestrained joy, before gasping as the helmet retracted into a small piece behind her neck. Void nodded to her, and she nodded back with an excited glare. Void then turned away and shook his head gently. Even amidst everything, the journey, the danger, the uncertainty, they had found a moment of peace once more. It felt unnatural, almost wrong after everything. But he just allowed himself to enjoy it. But then, like always, that tranquility lasted only moments more. Without warning, Jada's voice split the air, not with laughter or joy, but with sharp, visceral panic. "What the hell is that?" Her hands moved swiftly, snapping the hatch to Jay's crib shut with a desperate click. The sound sent Void into instant alertness. He snapped his head around, his eyes scanning the forest for any sign of threat. For one small second, he saw it. Something massive tore through the air above the canopy, an object that seemed impossibly large, even from a distance. The thing roared out from the gentle glow of the forest as it passed overhead. A hammer. A hammer the size of Kor himself, its sides radiating with the unmistakable luminescence of dark blue spark essence. Before anyone could react, before another warning could be shouted, the hammer struck the water, and the impact was cataclysmic. The shockwave struck Void's boat like a giant's palm, setting wooden planks scattering and bodies tumbling. The force was overwhelming, absolute. Everything became sound, fury, and blinding light. Void felt himself get lifted, thrown, and stripped of all coherent thought. Then darkness. He came to with a violent gasp, his lungs screaming for air. He found himself submerged, the freezing current pulling at his limbs like grasping fingers. Pain exploded through his skull. Each soul chamber beat out a thunderclap of agony that threatened to shatter his consciousness. His vision swam, refusing to focus. Through the haze, he saw shadows moving nearby. Friends? Foes? He couldn't tell. The water burned cold against his body. The darkness took him again. He then awoke, his eyes fluttered open. Through the murky, blue blood-tinged water, he could distinguish forms moving in the chaos. A figure, no, multiple figures. He saw Jada, her unconscious body limp as a stone hand clawed into the current and pulled her out. He tried to scream, to move, to help, but his body refused every command. The darkness swallowed him once more. When he returned to awareness, Void found himself being dragged, not through water anymore, but across rough, frozen ground. His limbs hung loose, unresponsive, his head rolled sideways, his vision returning in fragmented glimpses. Blurry shapes resolved in the forms, flashes of green and orange, the panic-stricken shouts of his companions, tall, stone figures moving with power and numbers, then nothing. He came to yet again, this time with a sickening sensation of movement. The world swayed around him, his body jolting with each passage over uneven terrain. He was moving. Metal bars rose around him, cold to the touch, his family and friends also out cold next to him. He bounced and swayed. That's when he realized he was in a cart. It creaked and groaned with each rotation of its wheels. And beyond those bars, he could see them. They moved in perfect unison, their forms towering, their bodies constructed of the same living stone that had seized Jida, their visors glowing with intelligence. Their movements were janky, devoid of souls, just magic. The Wardens. That was the last thing Void registered before the darkness claimed him fully, completely. The cartwheels continued their relentless rotation, carrying him and his captured friends and family into the unknown. Void slowly came to his senses, his eyelids fluttering as they were scorched by the piercing glow of a thin veil of light. As his vision sharpened, he took in his reality. Looming above him were thick, gnarled roots that pulsed with a rhythmic, sickly hue of purple and orange light, weaving themselves into a tight, cage-like structure around him. Beyond the unnatural formation, he peered into a suffocating canopy of leaves and branches, where a warm, dying yellow light filtered through the seams to illuminate his surroundings. With a groan of protest from his aching muscles, Void rolled to his side and forced himself onto one knee, taking in the full scope of his confinement. He knelt inside of something gargantuan. He was imprisoned within a root cage, the thick wood riddled with cracks that bled a mixture of light and dark matter. The surrounding environment was dominated by massive trunks that intertwined overhead to form a vaulted ceiling. Lush foliage clung to the bark, dripping with dark vines that gave the entire chamber an ancient, overgrown feel. The floor was an intertwined mess of wood and luminescent moss. However, when he noticed them, he paused. There were other cages lining the perimeter. Within them sat alien creatures from the Matter Realm. Some were soft and furry, others hulking monsters with impenetrable scales or hides. Oh, jeez, Void huffed. But their misery was absolute. In more than a few cages, only skeletons remained, bound by roots that had burrowed deep into their chests and spines, puncturing the corpses like parasitic thorns. To his right, Void's gaze was drawn to a particularly haunting sight. Lying on the floor of an adjacent cage was the remains of a spark. Stripped of all synthetic flesh, its skull featured 4 large jagged horns, and its metal skeleton was withered and rusted, visible beneath shattered armor that had roots crawling into it. It was of a soul that looked to have come from his era, not the past. The armor was modern from when he was on Salvaheim, the latest tech before all went to hell. This shocked Void to his core. There had been another survivor, or perhaps a traveler before Lotus that had come here. He wasn't sure, couldn't be certain. Yet as Void examined the corpse, he realized the cage wasn't empty. Hobbling across the mossy floor, moving with a jerky, rhythmic set of thumps, was an axe. Void's brow furrowed in disbelief. It was a double-headed weapon, one large blade paired with a smaller, secondary edge. It vibrated with a soft yellow aura, the hallmark trait of light matter. At its center top, a yellow gem pulsed like a heartbeat. The upper shaft was an elegant, elongated white, accented by golden braces and a glowing yellow spark crest in the center. The handle was a rich brown, capped with a smooth golden end. The axe paused, seemingly noticing Void, and tilted its head end toward him, bending its form as if examining a new face it hadn't recognized. Startled, Void raised a hand in a hesitant wave. The axe shimmered with a brilliant golden flash, turning sidewards and waving its head back. "What the?" Void asked, when suddenly, "Oh, Uncle Void! You're awake. I thought you were dead." Void whirled around to see Joby standing on the other side of the cage, her eyes wide with relief. "Joby, where are we? Where are the others?" Void asked. "Jet, you there? Jet!" Void then asked, only to find Jet was damaged and self-repairing, unresponsive. Joby balanced nervously on one foot after the other, glancing toward a cage to the left. I'm not sure. The wardens attacked out of nowhere. They caught us off guard and threw us into these magical plant cages. She gestured to the tangled roots. We're inside some massive tree. I'm talking my dad's muscles kind of massive. I saw so many other creatures on the way in. I think this is some kind of prison. Always knew I'd serve my time one day. Oh well. She looked towards the nearby skeleton without a change in expression. I think they're going to use us to feed the tree. Above them, a wet, gasping sound broke the silence. They looked up to see a slender, spiked branch wrapping around a humanoid captive. The wood suddenly dug deep into the victim's skin. Void recoiled, his stomach turning. Oh, by Matira, he whispered, holding back a glob of vomit. His face hardened. Jida, Jay, everyone, we have to fight and help them. He lunged at the bars, gripping the pulsing roots with all of his strength, but they were as unyielding as stone. He summoned his Nova Blade and slashed with desperate fury. The blade sparked against the wood, leaving not a scratch. Damn it! He roared. Joby was no longer looking at him. Her eyes were fixed on a different cage nearby. Void turned, seeing her curious posture and stare. What is it? Void asked, following her gaze. Inside, there was a small creature. A teal-green slug-like being with bulging wide eyes. 6 tiny, glowing orange orbs hovered above its head. It had a permanent, tragic frown, and 2 stubby arms hung limp at its sides. It was no larger than a medium-sized dog. It let out a soft, mournful, "Oh, Uncle Void, it's scared," Joby whimpered. Void cocked his head, watching the creature blink slowly. Stay focused, Joby. You got any plans of getting out of here? Are the wardens still around? Void asked, slashing at the branches again. Yep, Joby nodded, her voice high as ever. Them and those dark matter Spartans, they're roaming the halls like hunting dogs. Void hung his head, dissipating his blade and gripping the roots again, his mind racing. Think, Novason, think. The movement of the axe caught his attention once more. It was frantically shoving itself against the wooden bars, trying to seemingly reach him. Void tilted his head. Hey, can you understand me? The axe stopped its frantic motions and bowed. Void's eyes widened. Whoa, okay, he replied with surprise. Are you trying to escape too? The axe bowed again, fascinating Void further. I see. Was that your owner? Void asked on, gesturing to the 4-horned skeleton. The axe gave a small, rhythmic wiggle, and I guess so sort of response. Void nodded with a perplexed look. The axe then continued to slam into its cage, frantically trying to get the Void. You sure? Are you a threat? Because you seem a bit eager to come near me and the kid here. How am I supposed to know you didn't kill the poor guy? The axe stopped frantically, shaking from side to side in a no gesture. So, are you a friend then? The axe nodded. Are you sure you're a friend? Void asked. The axe nodded again. Alright, prove it. Do a little dance for me if you're sincere. The axe proceeded to do a small jig, moving from side to side, making Void crack a smile. Alright, I'll take it. So, why do you want to come near us? Are you wanting to get my attention for something? The axe nodded its head. Did you want me to do something? The axe nodded again. Are you trying to help us? The axe nodded once more. Void pondered, rubbing the back of his head. Okay. Can you break through these cages, or is it a dud effort like my blade? The axe lowered itself, then hobbled over to the skeleton, and gave the metal bony hand a sharp kick with its handle. It gestured to the arm, then performed a swaying, off-balance motion, nearly tipping over. Oh, Void realized. Okay, so you need someone to swing you to actually break through stuff. You need more force, is that correct? The axe nodded vigorously. Oh, makes sense. Can't imagine you're much of a fighter when your handle is doing all the walking. Void chuckled. The axe tilted itself, looking profoundly unamused. Sorry. Didn't mean to strike a nerve. So, you need me to swing you to break out. Do you have any ideas on how we even do that? The axe nodded, and flipped itself on its head. With an awkward tilt, it began pushing itself to stick its handle through an opening in the roots. Void could see what it was trying to do. Hey, I don't think my arms are going to fit through these roots, buddy, Void said, trying to stick his hand through the cage, while the axe got lodged in an awkward position, its head now resting off the ground while its entire handle stuck outside. It suddenly began to twitch and shake with annoyance. Buddy, this isn't going to work. My hands are too big and now you're stuck, Void said as they both gave up on the idea. Void retracted his hand while the axe sat lodged in its own failed attempt at freedom. Uncle Void, I just remembered, Joby then said, hobbling over. Void looked at her and watched as Joby pulled out a matter sprite from under her coat. Papa gave me one of these just in case I ever needed it. Maybe this could get us out. Void stared at the small sprite, this one glowing a faint green with a yellow shine inside. What kind is it? Void asked as he took it. That's a power sprite. It amplifies your strength. Maybe it'll be enough to break us out, Joby said as Void eyed the sprite. He nodded to it, while the axe struggled to free itself from its predicament. Well, as we find out, he muttered. With a deep breath, he crushed the sprite in his palm. The transformation began instantly, though it was subtle. His horns, eyes, and the veins under his skin shimmered in a mix of neon green and gold. An adrenaline rush, violent and pure, flooded his nervous system. Knowing the window would be short, he grabbed the bars and channeled his energy. Joby, get down! Void charged his horns, a deafening hum vibrating through the chamber. With a roar of exertion, Void unleashed a massive pulse. The energy exploded outwards in rings of pure force. To his surprise, it shattered his cage, the axe's cage, and the slug thing's cage. Void staggered forwards, his legs barely supporting him as he emerged from the shattered remains of the cage with Joby by his side. Thick mist curled around him like ghostly fingers, while faint beams of light pierced through, casting long shadows across the wooden chamber. From somewhere in the blur beyond, an uproar began, the desperate cries of the other imprisoned creatures witnessing freedom and begging for release. It worked, Void exhaled, with a mixture of disbelief and triumph in his voice. He turned to look for Joby, but she had already scuttled away towards the other cage. She didn't hesitate. Without waiting, Joby ran forwards and grabbed the small creature. She then re-emerged before Void, cradling it in her arms, its tiny limbs dangling uselessly as she lifted it overhead. Oh, the creature groaned. Don't worry, little one, Joby proclaimed, her voice ringing with unbridled joy. You're free now. I'm gonna call you Gluppy. She swung the creature over her back, where it clung desperately to her coat, its single cry punctuating the air. Oh. Void tilted his head at the scene, but his focuses shattered the instant he caught wind of movement. Enemies were approaching. He could hear them coming. Then two doors burst open, hidden within the root-like formations. It poured out the same dark matter Spartans that were within the factory. Their swords gleamed in their fists, shields raised before them, and their bulging eyes glowed with predatory hunger. Behind them stumbled in more monstrosities with mouth eyes. They were humanoid, goopy, and dark purple. One of the creatures surged forward, closing the distance with terrifying speed. Void raised his hand, preparing to summon his blade, when suddenly, the axe flipped itself forwards. With impossible precision, the sentient weapon launched from wherever it had been thrown from the explosion, hurtling through the air and striking the advancing beast squarely in the chest, knocking it back upon the floor. The axe landed cleanly on its hilt, then pivoted smoothly to face Void. A magical light matter resonance hummed from its blade, a sound somewhere between a chime and a whisper, as if the weapon were speaking in an unknown language. "There you are!" Void breathed, extending his hand toward the axe. "You ready to get out of here?" The axe nodded. Void nodded back. Then the axe jumped into his grasp. And as it made contact, something profound transferred between them. For the briefest instant, Void's eyes ignited with yellow light, and his soul bloomed bright with shimmering golden radiance. The glow proved so intense that his very armor seemed to heartbeat with the golden light, outlines of light matter tracing every curve and edge of his suit. In that moment, Void experienced something he had never felt before. His body drew a breath of fresh air, even though he hadn't realized he'd been holding his breath. He felt lighter, somehow freed from invisible chains, stronger, not merely physically enhanced, but spiritually uplifted, as though some fundamental limitation had been removed. When the yellow light faded from his irises and body, returning them to their natural blue hue, Void gazed down at the axe resting in his grip. It shimmered beautifully, the golden rays from above catching its surface and scattering light across the walls like liquid sunshine. He couldn't explain it, but it felt as though he had known how to wield this weapon his entire life. It was as though the weapon had chosen him. Void looked forward once more, where the Dark Warriors continued their approach. He readied the axe, and immediately felt a surge of power course through him. "Alright, buddy," Void huffed with determination. "Let's see what you can do." Joey leapt onto his back, her laughter bubbling forth like manic music. "Oh, this is gonna be fun!" Then, Void moved. He executed a devastating spin slash, the axe sweeping upwards in a graceful arc of destruction. The blade connected with the leading dark matter warrior's sword, and the enemy's weapon shattered like fragile glass, cleaving cleanly in two. Light matter erupted from the collision point, blazing outwards in a spectacular display of radiant beauty. Time seemed to elongate as the impact registered, each second stretching into an eternity of brilliance. But Void pressed forward without delay. He spun again and again, slashing with a speed that surprised even him, far faster than he had ever moved before. The dark matter creature dissolved beneath his assault, reducing to muck before simply evaporating entirely. Void steadied himself with a blade twirl, then scanned leftwards, where more warriors approached with the growing chaos. He cleaved the air sharply, and energy slashes burst from his attack, sailing across the gap, striking the monsters with staggering force. With a shout, Void then hurled the axe, glowing particles dispersing behind it like celestial fragments. The axe began to spin, completing a full spin around Void's position before returning to him, boomeranging in an elegant arc that cleaved through the enemies like a knife through butter. Void caught the weapon as it returned, trusting his instincts fully. He leapt, elevating himself impossibly high, and brought the axe down in a devastating downward strike. A wave of light matter erupted from the impact, sweeping forwards and utterly annihilating the remaining warriors in its path. "Whoa! That's so cool!" Joby cheered from her perch, her voice carrying over the remnants of the battle, while Gluppy just groaned. Void steadied himself, breathing heavily, and surveyed the damage. More monsters were entering the room, their numbers seemingly endless. "By Matira!" Void exclaimed. "What kind of axe are you?" He readied himself for the next horde. Another belly-mouthed dark matter creature attacked, swinging a massive mace with terrifying force. Void dodged, moving faster than ever before. He slipped away from the attack with grace. He glided backwards in a flowing slide, his movements like air itself, completely weightless and without resistance. As he slid, he spun, converting his defensive evasion into an offensive position. He felt extraordinary. The axe granted him lightness, speed, and agility beyond anything he had previously experienced. He felt like a different being entirely, his body transformed into something greater than it was before. Putting these new capabilities to the test, Void counterattacked in a motion he had never executed before. "Hold on, Joby," he warned as he launched himself sideways towards the monster. Defying gravity entirely, he spun horizontally through the air, the axe circling him like a deadly hurricane, tracing a perfect ring of destruction. It sliced cleanly through the mouth-bellied beast, reducing it to scattered muck before Void even completed his rotation. "My Darthian spear!" Void gasped, breathless from both exertion and astonishment, as he readied himself for the next wave. A creature lunged, one of those beating heart monstrosities, with its claw extended for a killing strike. Void flipped backwards, his legs tugging beneath him in perfect form, and kicked with such force that the creature sailed screaming into the air. Void jumped after it, launching himself into the air and began to slash at the monster with deadly precision. The axe, somehow defying natural law, it allowed him to hover momentarily, suspended in defiance of gravity itself. He swung and clashed wildly, transforming himself into a living storm, dismembering the beast piece by piece before descending back to the ground. As he landed, the axe spun rapidly around his feet, taking out the legs of the creatures that had crept too close, then continuing its rotation upwards to sever their heads as well, before returning the Void's waiting hand. He couldn't believe the power flowing through him. Never before had he felt such mastery over his circumstances. But before he could admire his achievement further, a new horror entered the room. It was a bloated, dark yellow slug-like dark matter monster, appearing more fat than creature. Its massive form filled the doorway as it crawled inwards, its armored belly glistening profusely while a sword dangled from its meaty fist. Eyes covered its whole body with no discernible head or starting point. Void scoffed with annoyance. "So, you freaks coming extra large now, huh?" The beast attacked with a lunge. Void launched himself forwards, flipping through the air with acrobatic grace, and drove his axe directly into the monster's body. With a sharp yank, he tore a fat chunk clean from its form, nearly half of it entirely. The body instantly collapsed behind him as it rapidly deflated and melted away in the nothingness. Turning, Void spun the axe once more and released it. It bounded before him, almost appearing excited, like an eager dog awaiting for its owner's next command. What are you?" he asked, extending his hand in a puzzled curiosity. The axe gave no reply. Instead, it performed something truly unexpected. It jumped upwards towards Void and Joby, and to both their surprises, it dissolved in the motes of radiant light matter. These particles swirled around his form, coalescing in the pure energy before streaming directly into his palm. Void recoiled instinctively, then watched in stunned silence as the axe faded away before his eyes, absorbed entirely into his being. "Whoa!" he whispered, his eyes wide with perplexity and wonder. Something shifted within him then, something fundamental and profound, though he couldn't articulate what. With curiosity overriding his caution, Void focused his thoughts. He attempted the same mental command they used to summon his Nova Blade, but now directed the intention toward the axe instead. The axe materialized in his grip, with a magical giggling sound that erupted from its blade, as though it found humor in its summoning. Void smirked. "Huh. So you're a type of Nova Blade?" The axe gestured awkwardly, its handle twitching in what might have been a shrug, unable to provide any satisfactory explanation. Void nodded slowly. "I see. You want to stick around? I could use your help." The axe nodded. Void nodded back. He turned to face the other cages behind him, each enclosure containing prisoners who had witnessed his victory and now waited with desperate hope for liberation. Void, with sympathy in his soul, threw the axe, boomeranging it around the room with a controlled precision. The blade cut through each cage efficiently, freeing the creatures contained within. As he caught the weapon upon its return, Void nodded to the escaping beings. "Go! Get out of here!" The creatures needed no additional encouragement. They scattered in every direction, fleeing towards freedom while Void stood and watched. Void dissolved the axe back into his palm, its energy warmly integrating with his own, and turned down a long corridor within the massive tree structure, beginning a search for his family. The wooden corridor stretched endlessly before them, the ground creaking beneath Void's urgent footfalls. Joby and Gluppy clung on tightly as they dashed through hall after hall. Void's soul hammered against his ribs. His concern burned hot within his chest, heavier than any physical weight. Gotta find my family, the thought echoed relentlessly through his mind, his worry for them consuming his thoughts. They then entered into another large room. The space was vast, its ceiling lost in shadow far above, where a canopy of leaves formed a natural roof. Massive roots twisted upwards like frozen waterfalls, reaching desperately toward the distant ceiling. Particles of light and darkness danced between them. "This way," Void breathed, his voice barely a whisper. But before he could take another step, one of them appeared. A shape emerged from an opening in the far wall, a hulking knight of stone, bristling with malevolent intent. A warden. The knight's statue was enormous. In its massive fist, it wielded a sword that bloomed with a dark matter aura, its visor steaming hot with malevolent energy. Void's hand shot forward, and in a flash of yellow light, the axe materialized in his grip again. He stared intensely at the knight, with a bead of sweat spilling down his brow. The warrior slammed its chest with its free hand, and then from somewhere within the mountain of rock, that bellowing cry erupted. The words hung in the air like a curse, vibrating through the chamber's wooden walls. Then the warden began to stomp forwards, each footfall sending tremors through the floor. However, before the fight could commence, Jida materialized without warning. She warped in from behind the stone beast, her form flickering into existence. In her hands, she gripped a chain of cosmic energy, the links between them shimmering with fury. With a fierce shout, she lunged forwards. The chain snaked through the air with perfect precision, wrapping around the warden's neck like a serpent made of pure light. She yanked backwards with all of her considerable strength. The massive knight stumbled, its balance shattered by this unexpected assault. But Jida didn't hesitate. She warped again, appearing directly in front of the stone warrior. Her body twisted midair, one leg extended in a perfect midair kickflip. The blow connected with the beast's chest, and the impact sent shockwaves rippling across its rocky surface. She landed gracefully in front of Void, her expression fierce, her posture coiled like a spring ready to release. A mighty snarl curled on her lips. "Baby?" Void asked, his voice cracking with relief. Jida turned, her eyes widening. "Void!" They rushed together, and their lips met in a desperate kiss, tasting of fear and joy. "Ew," Joby muttered, averting her eyes while Gluppy just groaned. "Oh. Are you okay?" Void asked, his hands framing Jida's face, searching her eyes for any sign of injury. She nodded, a smile breaking across her features. "Yeah, I was able to warp out of a cage I got stuck in." She glanced at the axe in his hand, her brow furrowing. "New weapon?" Void shrugged, a half smile tugging at his lips. "More so a friend." As if in response, the axe wiggled in its grip. Jida's eyes went wide with astonishment. "Oh, Jesus, it's alive?" she gasped. "I guess," Void said, his attention shifting back to the warden, who was pulling itself back to its full height. "Where's Jay?" he then asked with urgency. The answer came in the form of a sudden whoosh that made everyone duck. A rocket soared past their heads, so close Void could feel the heat off its exhaust. It struck the warden square in the chest, the explosion sending the stone knight crashing into the wall with a thunderous rumble. They all turned to look behind them. "Right there! We escaped together," Jida said, holding a note of pride in her voice. Hovering out of the shadows, Jay emerged in his hover carriage, its underbelly now deploying a rocket launcher-like device that made it resemble some sort of mechanized tank.
Kaboom!
Jay cooed, slapping a button on his control deck with Lee. Another rocket launched from the apparatus, spiraling through the air with pinpoint accuracy. Void and Jada sidestepped just in time, and the projectile struck the wall beside the warden as it fully stood, the explosion illuminating the chamber in bursts of orange and red. Roaring angrily, the warden raised its sword once more. You know, I was just wondering what kind of defenses Core installed into that crib, Void said, glancing up at the looming figure of stone and darkness. You ready to take on this fossil? Jada asked, summoning her massive hammer. You bet, Void replied, falling into a combat stance. Then as one, they advanced. With a lunge and slash, Void swung his axe. Yellow energy erupted from the blade, creating a crescent slash that streaked towards the warden. The stone warrior faltered, but it recovered quickly, spinning around with surprising speed for something so massive. Its sword came down like a hammer of darkness. Void sidestepped, twirling across the floor in a cascade of yellow light that seemed to leave an afterimage in his wake. It was an echo of motion that lingered like mist. Jada warped alongside him, her expression one of shock. Whoa! I've never seen you move like that before! She exclaimed with amazement. Well, just you wait, Void called, gearing up for his next assault. He leapt high into the air, performing a mid-air attack that defied gravity again. He released the axe, letting it spin around his body, striking at the warden. That wasn't all. At the same time, he summoned his Nova Blade and performed mid-air slashes, the blade leaving trails of blue light in its wake, before catching his axe and dissolving the Nova Blade into particles of energy. He kicked off the warden itself, executing a perfect backflip that brought him to the ground in a crouch. Jada stared at him, stunned. Then a competitive fire lit her eyes. Alright, show-off. You're not the only one with new tricks up your sleeve, she cried, summoning cosmic energy to her hands and feet. With a burst of speed, she blasted upwards, hovering in place for just a moment. Then she rocketed downwards, her hammer spinning so fast it looked like a small fiery tornado. The impact of the warden's side was catastrophic. The stone cracked and crumbled where she struck, an entire arm breaking off and tumbling to the floor. Void smirked. Looks like someone's been practicing the fly. He slashed back in, cutting at the warden's legs, the yellow energy of his axe severing chunks of ancient stone. Still haven't reached the same level as I had with Warnog, but I'm getting there, Jada said, warping back down and immediately summoning her bow. She fired an arrow in one fluid motion. It streaked toward the warden and struck the visor directly. A burst of dark matter erupted from the impact, consuming the stone face. All around them, chaos reigned. Jay soared around the room, hugging the wall and continuously firing rockets from his Detecto crib. Some rockets hit their target, aiding in breaking apart the warden. Others missed spectacularly, creating explosive displays that turned the battle into a disastrous symphony of noise and destruction, leaving small fires to form. The warden was cracking, the accumulated damage from all three fighters finally taking its toll. Chunks of stone fell away, revealing the darkness within. Void saw his chance. Jada, on me! Jada nodded, dissolving her bow and changing her weapon to an axe, a perfect mirror of Void's own weapon. They both leapt forwards, coordinating their movements, working in unison. They aimed for the neck, the weak point they had both identified in silent agreement. The unified slash, Void striking from the front, Jada striking from behind. They slashed as one. They passed each other midair, their axes slicing through the stone and darkness. The head snapped clean off. They landed together on the floor, the warden's headless corpse crumbling behind them. Dark matter exploded outwards, and faded into nothing, like smoke dissipating in the wind. The great stone warrior was no more. Jay continued slapping the controls of the crib, but an audible voice spoke through. Recharging, it said. The two stood in silence for a moment, catching their breath. Joby looked a bit dizzy on Void's back, her world spinning from rapid combat. Glubby's eyes were simply circling. Nice work, Jada said. All of a sudden, Void's axe hobbled out of his hand. The weapon hopped around Jida playfully, seemingly giggling as it moved. Jida giggled in turn, wonder crossing her features. "Oh, hello, Mr. Axe," she said, as it made a magical whistle of joy. "How did you even find this thing?" she asked, as the axe did a small wiggling dance. "It was in a cage beside me and Joby," Void explained, as the axe dissolved and returned to him. "It looked like it belonged to a spark that came here before us," Void went on, looking down in thought. "And I guess it likes me. I don't know why, but I'm not complaining," he finished, leaving Jida rather curious about its origins. "Maybe Cogson will know," she said, her mind already working through the possibilities. Jay hovered over, his protective crib humming softly.
Kaboom!
He cooed again. "Come on, we gotta find the others." Jida nodded back, falling in the step beside him. Jay hovered along close by, and together they ran even further into the large tree. The interior of the ancient tree felt to swallow them whole. Jida and Void pressed their palms against the bark, feeling the rhythmic pulse of life force thrumming beneath their fingertips. The small group had squeezed through a wound in the trunk and now stood within one of the tree's massive cavities. Or rather, the cavity. Around them, roots as thick as ancient oaks twisted upwards. Bioluminescent sap pulsed from within the walls, casting the cavern in alternating waves of light and dark matter. Towering statues lined the massive roots, each one depicting LaFlora. The statues of the goddess stretched toward the canopy above. Between them, wooden landings rose through the hollow chamber. At each tier, root cages sat within the walls, rattling with the desperate movements of their prisoners. Creatures of every kind pressed against the twisted bars, all trapped in this prison. "They have to be in here," Jada called out, her voice echoing off the wooden walls. Joby leapt from Void's shoulder to Jida's back, with Fluffy still clinging to her tightly. "You can teleport! We can find them faster," she said. Void nodded, his axe materializing in his grip with a shimmer of light matter. "You'll be able to warp them out. You search that side and I'll cover." The ground suddenly trembled as a blur of stone barged into the room, heading right for them. Jida warped instantly, Jay being taken with her, Gluppy, and Joby as they vanished in a cascade of cosmic light. Void attempted to sidestep, but a warden had already burst through another opening. This one was far bulkier than the others. Old moss clung to its shoulders like a weathered cape, and from its head extended two curved horns that flickered with devilish dark matter energy. Its sculpted helmet was sharp and angular. In its hand, it gripped a double-bladed stone sword, the edges humming with contained power. The warden moved faster than anything its size should have been able to. Void barely registered the massive stone hand closing around his head. The grip was powerful, and then the world became a violent blur of wood and stone as the Titan dragged him across the cavern floor. Splinters exploded upwards, and Void's back scraped along the wooden ground with powerful force. The warden then released him, and launched Void across the chamber like a discarded toy. He tumbled through the air, his muscles reacting before his mind caught up, and he landed in a backward slide, feet digging into the wooden floor, axe raised defensively. "Void!" Jida's voice echoed from above as she warped toward the cages. "Go! Find the others! I'll hold this one off!" Void shouted, readying himself. Jida hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "Jay, Joby, stay close!" They vanished in a flash of cosmic radiance, leaving Void alone with the stone warrior. The warden circled, its stone feet grinding against the wood with each deliberate step. This one bore a more purple tint to its ancient granite, layered with centuries of moss that had become one with its form. Its horns crackled with contained power, and its visor burned with violent dark flames as it spoke in an old tongue Void couldn't understand.
"Kursok, me to the crossel patho."
The warden turned slightly, and Void's soul chamber stopped. Hanging from the warden's side was a pouch. Course pouch, the little bag that contained the matter sprites. The being reached in, pinching carefully. It pulled out a fire sprite, the tiny crystal gleaming beautifully within the stone grip. "No!" Void gasped. The warden crushed the sprite in its fist. The reaction was instantaneous. Violet flames erupted from the warrior's body. Its arms were thrown upwards as it roared with devastating might. The sound shook the entire tree, and above, the cages rattled violently. The creatures within began to scream and howl, their voices rising in a chaotic chorus that filled the cavern like a witnessing crowd at some terrible sporting event. Void growled, readjusting the grip on his axe. "Those don't belong to you!" he shouted. The warden's visor flickered, and the Void's shock. It spoke with an understandable language, its voice grinding like tectonic plates.
Nor does Matira's grace need to adhere to your pleas.
With that, the battle began. With a sharp slash, the warden spun its dual blades in a devastating arc. They clashed into the wooden floor, and multiple rings of fire erupted outwards, a hurricane of purple fire spreading toward Void in a concussive wave. Void jumped, his body twisting through the air as the fire both faded and reignited around him. He dropped back down with a momentum-fueled swing, cleaving the axe across the warden's stone helmet. Stone chipped away, and the dark matter essence mingled with particles of light matter, creating a brief constellation in the air. The warden swung a clawed hand at him, but Void evaded easily, his new agility making him a ghost in the flame light. The creature stomped towards him, its foot capable of crushing almost anything. Void evaded with a glow of light matter as the massive foot struck the floor where he had stood. Fire erupted from the impact, following in his wake. "Easy, big boy," Void taunted, circling carefully. "Don't want to suffer a heat stroke now, do ya?" With a shout, the statue spun its blades again, creating a wind of fire that staggered Void backwards. Taking its chance, the warden reached over and grabbed him by the head, its grip almost crushing his skull.
Attack! No sparks up!
It bellowed, before whirling Void around and slamming him hard into the wooden ground. He bounced, twice, 3 times. Wood splintered upwards as Void's body ragdolled across the floor. Before he could recover, the warden raised its blade for the killing strike. Void shot his arm out, snagging a root that hung within reach. He yanked himself sideways just as the blade struck, missing his neck by mere inches. He quickly got back up and hurled 2 Nova runes towards the warden. They struck the warden's back, and chunks of stone exploded outwards, the creature whirling back around in a raw rage. With a surge of fire, it jumped at Void again, slamming its fist into the ground. A wave of flame erupted outwards. The Void dodged again, moving like water, and began to quickly slash in hard turns upon the warden. Each strike tore chunk after chunk off its body, dark matter mingling with the flames that were growing. The fire was spreading dangerously now. Cages began to weaken and break from the powerful surge of dark matter mixed with the warden's flames. Creatures screamed as their prisons gave way, falling toward the wooden floor below. With a spin that matched the speed of propeller blades, the warden spun its dual blades and brought them down upon Void, blade locking against his axe in a heel-digging standstill.
You will never reach Lady Matira.
The warden growled, its voice now disturbingly clear.
Even if you do, who's to say what you desire could turn into your greatest regret?
Void's scowl deepened. Lady Matira is benevolent and loving. She'll find a way to make this work. For all of us. You're just a test to get in my head. He pushed back, and with one hard swing, he cleaved the warden's hands off with a twist. A test of faith! He followed up, taking out its legs in 2 swift strikes, and snatching Kor's pouch from its side. We will make it to her, and we will set things right. Our race depends on it. Void swung his axe one final time, and the warden's head tumbled from its shoulders. Its body stood frozen for a moment, then collapsed, dissolving in the darkness. Now return to the matter from whence you came! Void called out, as the darkness faded and returned back to the Matter Realm's energy. Void took a tired breath, his body aching from the battle. He stretched and groaned. Ugh. God, I keep forgetting I'm not in high school anymore. He gazed down at Kor's pouch in his hand, thinking about the warden's words. His axe wiggled nervously in his grip, making a worried sound. Yeah, I'm okay, Void replied quietly to the weapon. Then he heard them. Several heavy footsteps echoed from deeper within the tree, the sound of stone grinding against wood, multiple wardens approaching from different directions. Void cursed, readying his axe. But before he could engage, salvation arrived. Dropping from the inferno above, literally falling through the still smoldering flames, came everyone. Kor, with the spear drawn, drove it through the head of one of the wardens, releasing a war cry as he spun and ripped it clean off. Beside him, Siga dropped with Joby and Gluppy on her back, spinning her scythe with a cry of her own. With a powerful slash, she cut and staggered several wardens, breaking arms and legs with each strike. Sky wasn't too far behind. As she fell, she launched her chain nova blades downwards, snagging a warden and pulling herself towards it. She activated the wheels on her boots and drove them straight into its head, knocking it down with a single devastating strike. Cogson, with a cackle that sounded slightly unhinged, summoned his axe and spun wildly, clashing down upon another warden. After him came Tooney, blasting downwards and lashing out dark matter from his arms. The energy snagged two wardens and threw them aside with a powerful heave. Jada warped back down, bringing with her Jay, the Anna and crew, Ellie and Coco, who were both holding Maple in their arms. Ellie didn't waste a second. She let go and raised her shotgun, beating the fire at the wardens, blowing off stone and dust from their bodies with each devastating shot. Void turned, seeing Cece and Winona helping Andy stand. His friend was clearly in agony, their leg at an odd angle. What happened? Void asked. Andy broke their leg when we were attacked on the current. Winona exclaimed, her voice strained. Cece hyperventilated from the stress and heat, her hands shaking. What? Void asked, his voice rising. Andy nodded, grunting in pain. It could just be sprain, but that's not better, is it? The rest of the group managed to push the wardens back for the moment, creating a temporary safe zone in the chaotic cavern. We need to get out of here! Kor exclaimed, gripping his spear tightly. Void nodded and tossed them their pouch. Kor nodded in thanks before putting it back on his belt. Anyone know how to get out of here? Void then asked. Silence fell over them, the sound of the approaching wardens growing louder. When Jet suddenly spoke, his speakers had fully repaired, his voice crackling like static.
I'm detecting an exit trap behind us, but we gotta make a break for it. More wardens are coming.
All heads turned, seeing more of the stone warriors emerging from the shadows. Come on, let's move, Void said, going over to Andy. I'll carry them, let's go! Let's go! He hoisted Andy over his shoulders. Ow! Ow! Easy! Andy cried, their leg dangling. Everyone turned heel and ran down the hall Jet had indicated, as the sound of the wardens giving chase behind them arose. Everyone sprinted through the ancient corridors of the great tree, Void leading the charge with his axe gleaming in the flickering firelight. Andy clung desperately to Void's shoulders, their legs dangling awkwardly to either side as they barreled forward like a stampeding bull. The entire group surged through the large wooden halls, their footsteps thundering against the gnarled bark beneath them, passing by countless matter creatures that scrambled to get out of their way. Using his axe, Void swung wildly in every direction, the blade whistling through the air as he batted aside reaching dark matter enemies with brutal efficiency. Both they and the roots grabbed at them from all sides, but Void cut through each one without breaking his stride. Hey, easy with that! Andy shouted, their voice strained with panic as they turned a sharp curve in the hallway. Andy gripped Void's cape with white-knuckled desperation. More dark matter monsters appeared from the shadows and rising flames, flanking them from both sides. Kor lunged forward with his spear, the weapon piercing through several of the creatures before he flung their writhing bodies aside. Sky approached from the left, moving with incredible speed as she cut down enemies in her path. The fire began to roar throughout the whole tree now, spreading rapidly through the wooden walls and causing cages to break open. Creatures that had been trapped now poured out into the chaos, adding to the already rising cacophony. It was like a zoo now, a crazed stampede to escape, while the wardens pursued from behind.
Keep moving!
Kor shouted, his voice cutting through the roar of the flames. Sika sprinted up alongside Void, matching his powerful strides perfectly. Joby looked over from her mother's shoulder, holding Guppy out towards Andy with a bright smile on her small face.
Look, Andy! I found a doggy!
She declared with a wide smirk. Andy just dangled sideways over Void's shoulders, their face twisted with a look of nausea. They looked somehow even more green than before, the motion of the sprint clearly not working well with their stomach.
I don't care,
they said with a queasy tone to their voice, sounding thoroughly ill.
I think I'm gonna puke,
they then said, gripping Void's cape even tighter.
Do not! Do not!
Void cried, slashing his axe again mid-sprint to take out an enemy that had gotten too close. The blade connected with a sickening crack, and the creature dissolved in the dark mist.
There! Up ahead! Looks like we got an exit!
Clarkson cried out, pointing towards a weak cracked opening in the tree's wall, letting the fading light in. It was their only hope, a promise of freedom. Void nodded grimly, and threw his axe. The weapon lurched forwards with tremendous force, shattering the opening into 1,000 splinters, then came spinning back to him, landing perfectly in his outstretched hand. Without thinking, they all leapt out the hole, their bodies hurling toward what they hoped was freedom. But they realized that was a terrible mistake almost immediately. As they all jumped, they looked down, realizing that they were very high up, impossibly high. The world below looked like a playset, everything appearing tiny from their vantage point. They had jumped from the very top of the giant tree, and there was nothing but empty air between them and the ground far below. Then it all came crashing back with the velocity of them falling. Multiple screams erupted from the group as they plummeted, but Void and a few others worked fast.
Hang on!
Void cried as he summoned his wings. In response, the other sparks did as well. Toonie ignited his body to flight, his entire form bursting in the green flames. Jida attempted to do the same, but failed to fully fly. Grunting, she warped over and snagged Jay's crib, sealing and holding it close. As the others got to work, Kor caught Winona and Francine by the hands, holding them close to his chest. Sky caught Cece with her large arms, while Sika caught both Ellie and Coco as well as Maple, their powerful wings straining but holding. Cogson, with a cackle that seemed almost manic, caught Meowcree while Toonie caught both Joby and Gluppy. Jida warped down the Void, who dissolved his axe and caught her and Jay within his arms. Andy clung on for dear life, their arms wrapped around Void's neck, her face buried in his shoulder. Behind them, the large tree began to collapse from the growing fire that quickly spread. A large, dark inferno arose, destroying what was once a beautiful and ancient landmark of the path. Soaring down, the group flew away from the scene, getting further and further away with every beat of their wings. They flew until they found a clearing near the edge of LaFlora's forest, their exhausted bodies finally touching down on solid, snowy ground. They all turned, looking at the tree in the distance now as it collapsed. Shock filled everyone as they watched what was once a mighty plant crumble into nothing. As it did, they unfortunately witnessed the wardens escape as well, leaping out into the forest below. They were much farther away now, but still a threat. Alongside them were many of the creatures they had allowed to escape.
Oh no. I remember reading about this tree in my studies,
Kor said, his voice heavy with realization, as everyone was set down on the soft snow.
The Great Life. One of the few landmarks that we knew for certain was in the path. It was LaFlora's home away from home, as she described it.
Toonie's brow furrowed.
A home with cages and killer roots?
Toonie asked, with an audible, confused tone. Cogson shrugged.
Probably designed after they decided to build challenges. Then again, LaFlora was known to be a bit of a freak.
Cogson added, as everyone continued to watch the tree crumble. How did the fire spread so fast? Cece asked, tending to Andy, who was gently laid down. Andy groaned, their legs still twisted at an unnatural angle. Dark matter is a powerful thing, kid. That warden Void was fighting mixed its essence with flames. Looked like it became a real pyromaniac, that one. Sika said, watching as Joby hopped off her and squeezed Gluppy with glee. I got a dog! I got a dog! She cheered, holding the creature up above her head. Her parents stared at her with confused eyes. No, Sika said flatly. Yes! Joby said, not backing down. Joby, no, Sika repeated, more firmly this time. I say yes, Sky said, crossing her arms. She gave Sika a challenging look. Sika glanced at her, but there was no real heat in it. Cor sighed and shrugged it off, walking over to where Andy lay. It's fine, Sika. I believe those creatures are on par with the turtles. All they do is exist. Cor said as he approached Andy and knelt beside them. What is it? Sika asked as Joby swung the creature around in circles. It's a Humano Kaloki Yinsuma, he said, pulling out a bright yellow matter sprite from his pouch, a light matter one. They're native to the realm, usually residing in trees, Cor stated as he handed the sprite to Andy. We're just gonna call him Gluppy, Joby squealed, bouncing up and down. Sika sighed but said nothing more. Here, since your wound is still fresh, this will heal you right up, Cor said as he helped Andy crush the sprite in their hand. A surge of light matter went across Andy's body. Within a flash, their leg fixed itself without pain. The bones knitting back together, the flesh mending, as if it had never been injured at all. They looked down, moving it with ease, testing the movement. Oh, wow. Thanks, Cor, they said with a baffled stare. Cor nodded slowly before standing. Void approached, Jida and Jay, checking on them. They were all right. The baby, as always, appeared unfazed by everything that had just happened. The chaos, the falling, the fire. Nothing ever seemed to bother Jay.
Maple,
He said, wiggling his arms past his parents. They turned, seeing Coco and Ellie tend to the hoovlin. You want to go see your friend? Jada asked with a smile. Turning, Void looked back at the tree, and then onto his hand, summoning the axe again. It jumped from his palm, and balanced before him, tilting with curiosity as if studying him in return. Thanks for the help. You're free now, buddy, Void said, gesturing towards the open world. But the axe hobbled forwards, bowing its head towards Void, then flipped on its head and angled the hilt forwards. Void cocked his head. Wait, you want to stay? He asked with genuine surprise in his voice. Winona spoke up with confusion, her voice cutting through the quiet moment. Is that axe alive? She asked, as Void and the axe turned to see everyone looking at them. In response, the axe flipped itself back upright and did another small little dance, spinning in the air with an almost playful energy.